Baldwin should play dull wango to your Jem Tospot." "Play the devil! for that's what you all seem bent on doing," exclaimed the squire, impatiently. "Away with you! I can have nothing to say to you." "You gave me the same promise at the castle at Preston last night," said Dame Tetlow. "I had been drinking, and know not what I said," rejoined Nicholas, angrily. "But you promised me a few minutes ago, and you're sober enough now," cried Nance. "I dunna know that," rejoined Dame Baldwin, looking reproachfully at him; "but what I do know is that neither of these squeamous queans shall go in afore me." And she looked menacingly at them, as if determined to oppose their ingress, much to the alarm of the timorous Dame Tetlow, although Nance returned her angry glances unmoved. "For heaven's sake, my good fellow, let them all three in," said Nicholas, in a low tone to the porter, at the same time slipping a gold piece into his hand, "or there's no saying what may be the consequence, for they're three infernal viragos. I'll take the responsibility of their admittance upon myself with Sir Richard." "Well, as your worship says, I don't like to see quarrelling among women," returned the porter, in a bland tone, "so all three shall go in; and as to who is played Doll Wango, the master of ceremonies will settle that, so you need give yourselves no more concern about it. But if I were called on to decide," he added, with an amorous leer at Dame Baldwin, whose proportions so well matched his own, "I know where my choice would light. There now," he shouted, "open wide the gate for Squire Nicholas Assheton of Downham and the three Doll Wangos." And all obstacles being thus removed, Nicholas passed on with the three females, amidst the renewed laughter of the bystanders. But he got rid of his plagues as soon as he could, for, dismounting, and throwing his bridle to an attendant, he vouchsafed not a word to any of them, but stepped quickly after Richard and Sherborne, who had already reached the great fire with the bull roasting before it. Appropriated chiefly to stables and other offices, the base court of Hoghton Tower consisted of buildings of various dates, the greater part belonging to Elizabeth's time, though some might be assigned to an earlier period, while many alterations and additions had been recently made in anticipation of the King's visit. Dating back as far as Henry II., the family had originally fixed their residence at the foot of the hill on the banks of the Darwen, but in process of time, swayed by prouder notions, they mounted the craggy heights above, and built a tower upon their crest. It is melancholy to think that so glorious a pile, teeming with so many historical recollections, and so magnificently situated, should be abandoned and suffered to go to decay, the family having many years ago quitted it for Walton Hall, near Walton le Dale, and consigned it to the occupation of a few gamekeepers. Bereft of its venerable timber, its courts grass grown, its fine oak staircase rotting and dilapidated, its domestic chapel neglected, its marble chamber broken and ruinous, its wainscoting and ceilings cracked and mouldering, its paintings mildewed and half effaced, Hoghton Tower presents only the wreck of its former grandeur. Desolate indeed are its halls, and their glory for ever departed. However, this history has to do with it in the season of its greatest splendour, when it glistened with silks and velvets, and resounded with loud laughter and blithe music; when stately nobles and lovely dames were seen in the gallery, and a royal banquet was served in the great hall; when its countless chambers were filled to overflowing, and its passages echoed with hasty feet; when the base court was full of huntsmen and falconers, and enlivened by the neighing of steeds and the baying of hounds; when there was daily hunting in the park, and nightly dancing and diversions in the hall. It is with Hoghton Tower at this season that the present tale has to do, and not with it as it is now, silent, solitary, squalid, saddening, but still whispering of the glories of the past, still telling of the kingly pageant that once graced it. The base court was divided from the court of lodging by the great hall and domestic chapel. A narrow vaulted passage on either side led to the upper quadrangle, the facade of which was magnificent, and far superior in uniformity of design and style to the rest of the structure, the irregularity of which, however, was not unpleasing. The whole frontage of the upper court was richly moulded and filleted, with ranges of mullioned and transom windows, capitals, and carved parapets, crowned with stone balls. Marble pillars in the Italian style had been recently placed near the porch, with two rows of pilasters above them, supporting a heavy marble cornice, on which rested the carved escutcheon of the family. A flight of stone steps led to the porch, and within was a wide oak staircase, so gentle of ascent that a man on horseback could easily mount it, a feat often practised in latter days by one of the descendants of the house. In this part of the mansion all the principal apartments were situated, and here James was lodged. Here also was the green room, so called from its hangings, which he used for private conferences, and which was hung round with portraits of his unfortunate mother, Mary Queen of Scots, and of her implacable enemy, Queen Elizabeth, of his consort, Anne of Bohemia, and of Sir Thomas Hoghton, the founder of the Tower. Adjoining it was the Star Chamber, occupied by the Duke of Buckingham, with its napkin panelling and ceiling fretted with golden fires; and in the same angle were rooms occupied by the Duke of Richmond, the Earls of Pembroke and Nottingham, and Lord Howard of Effingham. Below was the library, whither Dr. Thomas Morton, Bishop of Chester, and his Majesty's chaplain, with three puisne judges of the King's Bench, Sir John Doddridge, Sir John Crooke, and Sir Robert Hoghton, all of whom were guests of Sir Richard, resorted. And in the adjoining wing was the great gallery, where the whole of the nobles and courtiers passed such of their time, and that was not much, as was not occupied in feasting or out of doors amusements. Long corridors ran round the upper stories in this part of the mansion, and communicated with an endless series of rooms, which, numerous as they were all occupied, and accommodation being found impossible for the whole of the guests, many were sent to the new erections in the base court, which had been planned to meet the emergency by the magnificent and provident host. The nobles and gentlemen were, however, far outnumbered by their servants, and the confusion occasioned by the running to and fro of the various grooms of the chambers was indescribable. Doublets had to be brushed, ruffs plaited, hair curled, beards trimmed, and all with the greatest possible expedition, so that, as soon as day dawned upon Hoghton Tower, there was a prodigious racket from one end of it to the other. Many favoured servants slept in truckle beds in their masters' rooms, but others, not so fortunate, and unable to find accommodation even in the garrets, for the smallest rooms, and those nearest the roof, were put in requisition, slept upon the benches in the hall, while several sat up all night carousing in the great kitchen, keeping company with the cooks and their assistants, who were busied all the time in preparations for the feasting of the morrow. Such was the state of things inside Hoghton Tower early on the eventful morning in question, and out of doors, especially in the base court which Nicholas was traversing, the noise, bustle, and confusion were equally great. Wide as was the area, it was filled with various personages, some newly arrived, and seeking information as to their quarters, not very easily obtained, for it seemed everybody's business to ask questions, and no one's to answer them. Some gathered in groups round the falconers and huntsmen, who had suddenly risen into great importance. Others, and these were for the most part smart young pages in brilliant liveries, chattering and making love to every pretty damsel they encountered, putting them out of countenance by their licence and strange oaths, and rousing the anger of their parents and the jealousy of their rustic admirers. Others, of a graver sort, with dress of formal cut and puritanical expression of countenance, shrugging their shoulders and looking sourly on the whole proceedings. Luckily they were in the minority, for the generality of the groups were composed of lively and light-headed people, bent apparently upon amusement, and tolerably certain of finding it. Through these various groups numerous lacqueys were passing swiftly and continuously to and fro, bearing a cap, a mantle, or a sword, and pushing aside all who interfered with their progress with a "By your leave, my masters," "Your pardon, fair mistress," or "Out of my way, knave;" and as the stables occupied one entire angle of the court, there were grooms without end dressing the horses at the doors, watering them at the troughs, or leading them about amid the admiring and criticising bystanders. The king's horses were, of course, objects of special attention, and such as could obtain a glimpse of them, and of the royal coach, thought themselves especially favoured. Besides what was going forward below, The windows looking into the court were all full of curious observers, and much loud conversation